In this video, I want to go over splitting out names. So we have this column of full names, but maybe we want a column for just first name and a column for just last name instead of full names to be in one column. Might be many reasons why you might want that. So one way we could do that is we'll go to our data tab and we can highlight all of these names. We'll go to our data tab and we'll go text to columns, and then we have this delimited option. We'll click next. And then we tell it what are our first and last names separated by. In this case, it's a space. You see all these have a space between their names. Sometimes it might be a comma, and you want to separate things that have commas or a semicolon. Or if it's an other, you can go ahead and type another. And then we'll go next again and finish. And you see it separates the first name from the last name because it's separating everything based on that space that was in there. But one problem with this you see is that the original text is now gone. It's just a first name text and a last name text. Maybe we still wanted that full name text as well. So I'm just going to hit Control Z to undo that. So the next way we're going to go through this is by using the search function. We're going to have to nest it with another function. So in this case, we're going to use the left function and the search function together to get the first name. So the left function is going to tell it, because the first name in this case is always on the left, it's going to tell it to look to the left, and the search function is going to tell it exactly how many letters to look to the left. Because if we were just to do left and then set this text and then we know the first name is 3, that's great. But once we are to drag this formula down, you see not all the names are only 3 letters. So that's where we could get into some trouble. And we don't want to have to know how many letters the first name is for every character. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our left function again, as always, and then open the parentheses, and then the text that we want is still that name text, and we're going to press comma, and this time we're going to write our other function, which is search. We're going to nest it with this next function, and you see it tells us to find what text. So it's going to search for what text we want it to find. In this case, it's going to be something that is common with all of these names. We want to search for that space. Kind of the same thing we did with that text to columns. We want them to search for a space. So we're going to put the quote, and I'm just going to hit the space bar and quote again. So we wanted to find that space, and then we wanted to search within the same text, the name text. So now we're going to take the most left letters of this name, and it's going to take the left all the way until it finds a space. So it's going to go until it finds the space, and then it will stop. So now I forgot to add the last close my parentheses, but you see it automatically says, do you want to accept this correction? It's just closing that last parenthesis. I'm going to say okay. And now when I drag it down, just highlight and press Control D, you see I get the name, the full name every time, because it's searching all the way until it finds that space, and then that's when the left formula stops. So now we're able to get the first names out of using that search function and left function together. So similarly, we want to get the last name, so we're going to use this time the right function, and we're going to once again use the text where the name is. But in this case, we can't just use the search function, because if we were to just use search, I'll do it again. We're going to tell it to search for a space. Oh, I didn't need that comma. So I'm going to tell it to search for a space again, and within this text, you can see now it's only getting that last 4 NSON. It's only 4 spaces till the text, so it's searching for the amount of numbers until that text. So the space, so there's 4 spaces, there's 4 different letters, there's 4 letters until that space. So it's JOE space, so that's 4, but in this case it always counts from left to right. So now it's just giving us the right function, so it's giving us the last 4 in this case. And before it was just giving us the first, searching that amount and then give us the first 4. So it's always searching from left to right. So you see this write function and search function don't work just by themselves. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to use the function that we went over earlier, is length, and we want to know the length of this text, and we want to subtract that by, now we're going to use the search function, and we want to find the space again, and we want to find the space in that text with that name text. So what it's going to do is going to take the entire length of the amount of characters in this name, and it's going to subtract it by the characters up until that space. So what we should be left with, all the characters up until that space, the whole name minus all the characters up until the very beginning of that, or the end of that space, should be just the last name. If you think about it, we're just subtracting J-O-E in that space minus all of the characters, and the rest over characters should be Johnson. So press enter. You see now we got the last name, and if I drag down, we have all the last names as well. So once again, it's just taking the entire length of the name, so the text we tell it to, the whole character, and it's subtracting by the amount of characters including the space. So it's going to subtract that, and we're just using the write function. So in this case, let's say Joe Johnson is 4, 1, 2, 3, including the space, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So the length would be 11, and then it's getting subtracted by 4, so the J-O-E in the space. So now we're telling it to look for the right 7 characters. In this case, the right 7 characters, the last name, is just does that every time. It looks all the way into the space, so it's basically counting the first name in the space, and it's subtracting that from the entire length of that name, and you'll just get the last name left over. So those are 2 different ways to text a column with and using the space, or you can use commas, whatever separating the 2 names, or whatever you're trying to separate. That's one great way to split them. And this is another way, using the left in the search function to get the first name. We use the right length minus search to get that last name. So what if we have first and last name already in separate columns, but we want to bring it back into one full name, so in the same column? So the way to do that is pretty simple. We're going to use this formula called concatenate. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but I'll show you when I start typing it out. And all it's going to do, we're going to tell it what 2 texts we want to combine, and it's pretty simple. So start by typing it in, concatenate, right here, concatenate, and I'll just click on that and then press tab so I don't have to type it out. So then the first thing it says, what text do we want? So I'm gonna say in this case I want to do a last name comma first name, so last name first. So I'm gonna put that last name, then we're gonna give it a comma, and then what text do we want next? And you might be thinking, oh, you just want the first name now, but no, I still want that comma, and I also want a space. So I'm gonna open the quotes, I'm gonna put a comma, then I'm gonna also hit the space bar so we have a space, and I'm gonna close the quotes, comma again, then I'll click that first name, and I'll close parentheses. And you can see now we have this full name, last name first, first name second, we have the comma, and we have the space in between it as well. So now we can, once again, we could just drag this down and it'll fill in all of these names, and we'll get the last name, first name setup. We could have done first name, last name, but remember to always, if you want a space between these 2 values, you always will have to, at least put a quote and then space and then an end quote to make sure a space is in there. I added the comma because I wanted to go last name then first name. But that's the concatenate formula. This is how we'll add text from different columns into one column. It might be any other thing that you guys can think of that you might want to add. There might not have to be names, or maybe there's a middle name, so then at the end you probably would have did Johnson / first name, and then you'd have to do another space, and then you would put the middle name. But once again, that's the concatenate formula. It just allows you to put text from multiple columns and combine it into one column.